the notions of God's justice and mercy. And so I'm looking at the universe and how knowable it is. And I'm reading this book about God's perfect justice. And it all just came together one day. I remember I stopped dead in my tracks walking across the campus and I think I said it out loud, there is a God. It's just like, bam, bolt of lightning. And it was such a joyful moment. I was so happy just letting go of that atheism and realizing I believed in God. And it was one of the best moments of my life.
And one of the things that saddens me about popular culture and some Christians who don't have this perspective is that there's a ton of people there are people, but I think they're a small minority truly, that just like one day I believe in Jesus, bam, they're Christian now.
Mm-hmm.
I know those exist. In fact, I've met a few.
Yeah.
That's not the most common transition. I mean, it does happen. Sygart, the molecular biologist I interviewed, go check our channel a couple of videos back. That pretty much happened to him. He realized he believed in Jesus pretty much simultaneously believing in God. A whole lot of people, I think, don't go that route. A ton of people in this world believe in God and have not made any leap to any religion because they don't have to. And it sounds like that was kind of where you were.
Yes, and I stayed there for a few years. So then I spent another really fun summer at UCSD doing research, and then got into grad school at UT Austin. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was my first year here. I found a book called The Science of God by Gerald Schroeder. And he is an Orthodox Jewish physicist and theologian. And this was the first attempt I had ever seen to put science and God together. And so I got the book because it just sounded intriguing.
Okay, so he's an Orthodox Jew, right? Did I hear that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, as a Christian, I can tell you right now, some of the smartest religious people in the world are some Jews, and have been for a long time, going at least back to Maimonides.
Oh, yeah. He introduced me to Maimonides and Nachmanides.
Of course he would. A smart Jew who was into science would have, because he's practically the Thomas Aquinas of the Jews.
Yes.
Which, really, I mean, just a brilliant mind. St. Thomas Aquinas, revered Rabbi Moshe, can't say it all, the Rambam.
Yes.
And actually some smart Jews helped me on my way to Christianity.
There you go.
Which is one of the reasons why anti-Jewish sentiment only goes so far with me, because they're still friends.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm an acolyte of Schroeder's, and I actually became friends with him.
An acolyte of who?
Of Schroeder's.
Oh, okay, right, Schroeder. He's the Jew. Right, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
Right. So, yeah, I was so taken with his argument that for a literal interpretation of Genesis that is consistent with modern science, it's so brilliant that I just was swept away by it. And so not only did I realize, I believe in God, but I believe specifically in the God of the Bible. And I started a correspondence with him, and he's very gracious, and he responds to my emails. We talked on the phone. He even came to visit Austin a couple of years ago. And
so what's this book?
The book is called The Science of God.
And the author again?
Gerald Schroeder.
Has he even gotten to meet him?
Yes.
The thing is that when I heard that, I got to tell you, as a Christian who has really, or just a religious guy even, who has really loved science his whole life a lot, and studied a lot of it, and known quite a few in a few fields, I get around. I've actually been appalled by the lack of scientific awareness in people talking about science these days.
Oh, yes.
And maybe we'll talk more about that, but whenever I hear something, when I saw that I'll be honest, when I saw that you were called 6-Day Science, I'm like, oh, great, another fundamentalist. I didn't even look. Yeah. And that was wrong. Yeah. I was wrong. That was prejudice on my part, but part of it was because really fundamentalist Christianity was one of the reasons I became an atheist. I came up, I feel I was
understandable.
I was scarred by some of it. I genuinely was.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to go, really, I can't hold that against everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that Jerry, as I'm now allowed to call him, he did not like the name either. He said to him too, it made him think of young Earth creationism. So, I deliberated with some of the other people in the ministry, and they wanted to keep the name. So, okay, we'll keep the name. But yeah, it couldn't be anything further from young Earth creationism because, the evidence is just too strong for an old universe.
The thing that I do have some skepticism, having just glossingly glanced over it, because I don't have the skull power to go dive into that. I do have some skepticism that I'll probe you on a little bit. But first, I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
People should know a priest, actually, a Catholic priest, a Belgian priest, gave us the Big Bang Theory. He really did. He was a cosmologist named Georges Lemaitre. His chief inspirations were, so far as I can tell, were the prime mover idea of Aristotle and Aquinas. He probably got it through Aquinas, the prime mover idea, and the book of Genesis. Praying and studying and getting inspiration is that's where we got the Big Bang Theory. And in fact, Father Georges Lemaitre, did not like the phrase Big Bang. Fred, it was Hubble or was it Hoyle?
Hoyle, yeah.
Yeah, named it that to disparage it. He wanted to call it a cosmic egg.
Yeah, the primeval atom, I think, is what Lemaitre called it.
He used both. He used the ultimate atom, the primeval atom, or the cosmic egg hatching, is what he called it. He liked the nonviolent metaphor, and you'll notice that's because the book of Genesis is the most nonviolent story of the beginning I've ever seen in spiritual literature.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredibly beautiful to me.
absolutely.
God, through nonviolent will, just speaks the universe into existence.
That's exactly what happened.
So extraordinarily beautiful.
I love Genesis. It's my favorite book in the Bible for obvious reasons. It's what brought me to Jesus.
All right, I'm going to ask you a novice question then. You've obviously got a deep understanding. I won't take you as authoritative, but explain to me what the waters of the deep are that came before the light.
Okay, now some people will disagree with this. I'm also friends with Hugh Ross, who's another old Earth Christian astrophysicist. Schroeder's interpretation, and I agree with this, we come from a particle physics cosmology perspective. Now, you have to consider, first of all, that ancient Hebrew had a very limited vocabulary. It was just a few thousand words. So what you found is that words had to have multiple meanings. The word water can also just mean fluid.
Oh.
Now, what I was shocked.
You mean like a quantum wave function ready to do something? I'm sorry.
Well, get this. It's very cool. Now, and people can look this up. When these experiments were done at particle colliders, they wanted to find out what the conditions of the early universe were like. They determined that it was a perfect fluid. You can call it a quark soup. Quarks are the most fundamental pieces of matter. It's the prime matter, as Nachmanides would call it. This is what made up the universe at the very beginning. And this quark and gluon mixture acted like a perfect fluid. And I think that's consistent with what Genesis is saying.
Lawrence Krauss, if he hears this, is going to go, "What?" Because he takes that quantum fluctuation and uses it in his books, A Universe from Nothing. He defines that same quantum state you're talking about as nothing.
Yeah.
It's not nothing.
It is so not nothing. Yeah. That's an abuse of the word nothing. It's not what it means.
Oh, Lawrence Krauss, one of your fellow physicists just accused you of abuse of language.
Yes.
I have fun with Lawrence Krauss and his acolytes. He comes out from Star Trek nerddom too, doesn't he?
Uh-oh.
I believe he does.
Know.
I believe he does, actually. He's
wouldn't surprise me.
Writing pop science stuff and that sort of thing. So. Okay, so let's get back on track. So you just this is all reasonable. Now I'm going to express my skepticism to you.
Okay.
And I'm just going and obviously we're not going to have a whole scientific discussion here. So, but my skepticism is: aren't you putting the cart before the horse? Aren't you just kind of somehow imposing what you want to see on the data to get there? I mean.
So, and this is a charge I've had leveled at this stuff before, that it's all just kind of retrofitting.
Well, you're an atheist when you started. You weren't any kind of religious person when you started studying this, that's for sure.
I was a general theist of no particular persuasion at this point. And when I initially read this, I approached it with some degree of skepticism. And I spent years pouring through this, checking the literature, doing the math to make sure this all worked out. And when I finally got to the point that I could not disprove it, that's when I just gave up and said, okay, this is real. Now, in terms of the retrofitting charge, the problem is the math of Schroeder's model just works out too well for that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And also in terms of, and like Schroeder's point is not that this proves God's existence. It's that for him, the point is to refute the charge that science and the Bible are fundamentally at odds. They aren't. There is a reasonable interpretation of both science and scripture that fit together. And I agree with that.
Nobody rational in history even believed such a charge until some of it started during what they call the Enlightenment. It seemed to pick up steam in the 19th century. The Marxists ran with it and such. Before that, nobody would have bought that because the church was running all the damn universities.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And and invented the peer review system. Thank you very much.
Yes. We can thank Christians for science.
We really can. And every time somebody guffaws and says Galileo, it's like, dude, Galileo was wrong on some things, and other scientists pointed out correctly that he was, which is why he got in trouble. And the other reason he got in trouble is he demanded the church take a position when it didn't want to. He kept asserting it as theological truth and demanding the church get on his side. And they were so mad at him.
He was an amazingly imprudent man.
You may laugh, but I say this with love. I'm convinced he was some kind of autistic. Nobody is that clueless.
Yeah.
Socially clueless.
He's brilliant, but he was socially clueless. Yes.
Brilliant, but socially clueless, unlike so many other scientists who are.
You're right.
The bottom line is Galileo's story is fascinating, but it's not what people think it is.
Not at all.
And it's one incident in a history of 1,000 years of scientific discoveries by this religion. I encourage
people to read up on that.
I do too. And even though Protestants won't like me saying it, please read How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization and shut up.
Well, especially, I started reading about the Middle Ages, and, it's this myth about the Dark Ages, and it couldn't be more false. It was a time of great, productivity and, the explosion of art and this great thought and everything that was building up to the emergence of modern science. Copernicus, for crying out loud, was Catholic.
Well, certainly he was. So was Louis Pasteur. But, even then, when we say how the Catholic Church built Western civilization, if we're being honest, we'll put a lowercase c on that, because after they came along, Anglican universities, researchers, Lutherans, even Presbyterians went on to form many universities. Yeah. Some of them in a complete shambles at the moment, but let's not go there.
It's depressing.
Another good book to read is called God's Philosophers, and it's about the Middle Age Christian philosophers primarily who gave us the whole Western scientific method and how their theological and philosophical training got them there.
Yes, yeah. Roger Bacon, a major figure in the development of science.
And actually, the atheists pitch this narrative that they were giving up their primitive religions and slowly coming to terms with reality. It's like, no, their religious faith was driving most of them, the big ones. And it wasn't in conflict. And I'll give you my explanation for God that works on a lot of nerds, or at least makes them go, oh, huh. My explanation of God for nerds is the thing that's running logic itself, including the laws of physics and the laws of probability. Yeah. Something intelligence is running that, and that's what we think.
Yeah.
Furthermore, if you believe that and accept that as your basic definition, something intelligent is running the universe, is observing and running the universe, making the laws of probability go, making the laws of physics go. If you accept that as your definition of God, how on earth could you possibly be in conflict with science at all?
Exactly.
The intelligent thing running the cosmos, you're examining how it does things. It controls physics. It controls probability. It is logic itself.
Yes.
That's what smart theists think. See, and Sarah agreed with me. So, score one, I have an astrophysicist, and you, atheist, have Sam Harris. So I win.
Poor Sam. Yeah.
Poor Sam. I cannot feel sorry for Sam Harris. That man has a paper PhD and has done nothing for science his whole life.
He actually really hasn't. I was surprised to find that out, that as somebody with a neuroscience background, I don't think he's actually done any neuroscience.
No, he got one of those. It took him almost 10 years to get your basic. He could probably get a job at a junior college.
Okay.
That's the extent of his PhD.
Well, far more lucrative to become a professional atheist and write books.
And pretend you know things that you can't know. And by God, there's a lot of pseudoscientific and unsupported claims in that man's work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just on history too, not just science, but on history. Now that I'm referring to earlier work, everybody please go see my interview with Borden W. Painter, Jr. of Trinity College, one of the most distinguished historians in the world, and he lays waste to horrific, I would call it scholarly malfeasance and propagandizing by Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Michael Shermer, Steven Pinker, and quite a few other big names, supposedly scientific atheists, openly accuses them of altering the historical records and fabricating things like Nazi and communist propagandists. Can't get any notice to that charge, but I'm putting it into everybody's ear every way, because really most prominent atheists have been discredited by this man, and you've got to ask whether you believe them or Borden Painter.
Yeah.
He's one of the most distinguished historians in the world. So, again, that was a rant. We're talking about your personal journey, and I accept your definition that, at least as a scientist who's clearly competent, how many papers have you published?
It's on the order of 20.
Yeah, right. And what's your specialty or subspecialty?
I study supermassive black holes, quasars, and galaxy evolution.
Galaxy evolution.
Yeah, it's not as provocative as it sounds. Galaxies do change with time. We're just trying to figure out how and why.
That's a lot, actually. Let me think of. I want to ask you some galaxy-related questions. What's the furthest out galaxy you've ever?
Well, okay, the stuff that I tend to, it's funny. It's all relative, right? The stuff that I look at would be considered very far away by people who look at these, things like Andromeda and planets in our own galaxy. I look at stuff that's about. We always think of this in terms of time. Stuff that corresponds to when the universe was about half its present age. So it's billions of light years away.
7 billion, roughly, call it.
Yeah.
On the order of 7 billion light years away.
And that's routinely where I'm at with my work. But some of my colleagues are looking at stuff that happened just, a very short time after the Big Bang happened.
Name a galaxy out there.
Way the heck, the problem is nobody names them at that distance. They all have these really boring catalog names, like SDSS 1123 plus 2157. That's it. It's based on their coordinates.
That makes sense. I am a science nerd, and I love astronomy and astrophysics. I've read Einstein. I love Einstein, actually. I've read actual Einstein, not books about Einstein.
Nice.
And then, I've read a lot of these old-timey physicists, and everybody should read Richard Feynman. He just should, if you like physics.
I have a
He's so
major
awesome.
intellectual crush on him.
I do too. I'll go gay for him if he'll come back to life for me now. No, I won't. But I love Richard Feynman. Yeah. He was a big inspiration to me as a kid. Even though I was never a scientist, I was always a science nerd. Now, what got me off on that rant? Oh, yeah, okay. So here's the thing, and you had said this before, and it's something I've noted. There's this absurd notion that there's no such thing as faith in science. And somebody has to do something to depuncture that, because there's faith all over science, isn't there?
Absolutely. And, for a lecture that I delivered a while back, I started researching this pretty heavily. And, already, just at the face of it, you have to have faith that the universe operates according to laws. You have to have faith that existence is real. You have to have faith that the laws of physics haven't changed with time.
Or that they have changed with time in only ways you understand.
Yeah, that you have to have faith in your own rationality. If you're an atheist, there's no basis for that belief. Science is just absolutely founded on faith.
In fact, the very intelligibility of the universe should be proof that something intelligent is making it that way.
Well, and that's exactly how I looked at it, yes.
That's Joseph Ratzinger's observation. How can you have an intelligible universe without an intelligence?
You can't. You can't. But, it's like my brother likes to tell people. My brother also converted to Christianity the same time I did in grad school. And he'd say to people, how do you know you're not just a brain in a vat somewhere? And in physics, we refer to this as the Boltzmann brain problem. And the problem is you don't. Without a creator, you don't know that you aren't just some statistical fluctuation hallucinating everything that you're experiencing right now.
Well, and there's more, and that's just one item of faith. I'll give you another one that I believe your whole field relies on. Okay, so you're looking at some galaxy. We're going to call this galaxy Max. You're going to pick a random galaxy roughly 7 billion light years away.